Hey guys, Jerry Bierman, owner of Alluring Glass. I'm with my good buddy Don Kennedy, owner of ProMaster Home Repair. How you doing today, Don?
It's always great to be with you, Jerry. You know that.
Yeah, man.
I can have
So
a horrible day, but if I'm with you, it makes it all better.
that's likewise. So for those of you that don't know Don, he and I have been good buddies for over a decade now. It's amazing how time flies, Don. And as I've known to, grown to know him and love him and respect him as a human being and as a business owner, you have some superpowers, right? You've got some expertise, and one of the things that we wanted to unpack today for the next 30 minutes is this idea of recruiting and training and building this talent pipeline. And in full transparency, I've never seen anybody with the depth of knowledge and understanding that you have as it relates to recruiting, training, onboarding, et cetera. So I'm super excited to capture this conversation. So first, thank you for your willingness to share. And if you want to take just a couple minutes and give a little quick bio on yourself and how you became so good at training and recruiting and training people.
Well, it's interesting. My background being a military pilot, when I was in the Air Force, the military's way of recruiting is just throw lots of money at it, right? Throw lots of recruiters out there, financial incentives. Whenever they don't have enough people, just throw more money at the problem, and use a lot of propaganda to recruit. And that's how they do it. And in
Yeah.
those organizations, like a lot of corporations, have big budgets to just churn through people, large training budgets, and they don't really care if they retain them. On our side of the equation in the trades, I don't need to explain to anyone what that's been like the past 5 to 10 years to find good quality people that are also have the skill set that is needed to build, repair, fix things, construct things. And so a lot of what, I don't even consider myself great at this. I'm just better at it than most people. It's been purely born of necessity, right? So they say all the time, necessity is the mother of invention. And the reality is our business being a people business and a customer service oriented business on the residential side, it's so dependent on the quality of people that you have. It's less about the widget and the product. So for us to get good at recruiting is just a core vital need of the business. If you don't get good at it, you don't exist.
That's good. And you did say budget, so give us just a framework um, around for listeners to say if you have fill in the blank, if you can allocate this much money, the range might be substantial, and you can allocate this much time. I think that's most of our buddies that lead and own businesses. Um, they do have limited resources of money and they have limited resources of time. So give
So
us
it's going
some
to ebb
insight
it.
there.
Yeah, this is going to ebb and flow a lot. I'm on the extreme end. I spend a lot of time when I'm in a recruiting phase. So I might spend as much as 20 hours a week on recruiting. And that's a lot for a guy trying to, do a bunch of million other things too. So usually if I'm in a recruiting phase, I'm probably also working weekends, right? To catch up on all the other things I need to do. But in terms of budget, we could spend anywhere from $2,000 to $5,000 in a month on a recruiting budget, to maybe pick up one hire or two hires. And that's just going to vary per industry, the type of people you're looking at. And to give you an idea of the volume, when I'm in a recruiting phase, and I tend to think of a recruiting cycle as lasting anywhere from 2 to 4 weeks, just kind of depending on the time of year. And I'm going to have in that cycle anywhere from 2 to 500 applicants come through in that short period of time. And I don't typically have a ton of help to screen all that. I do all that myself. And so that gives you an idea of the kind of volume, the number of people I'm touching, and the budget. So, if you are in a position where, like last year, I had 100% turnover in my company, 100%. And most people would feel like there's no way I could survive with 100% turnover and be profitable and still keep the quality of my product or service good. Well, we could, only because I've been at this so long. And when you hit a stretch for a variety of reasons where you have to turn over a lot of people because maybe you're changing your organization a little bit like I have, or the culture's changing, or the environment, like the economy is changing, and you need to reload with different people. The challenge I would put to everyone is you need to have a hiring system that will support your worst case turnover scenario. So if your worst case turnover scenario is 50% or 80%, or in my case, 100%, it is possible, even in this day and age, to put together a system that will produce for you whatever the business need is for the organization, so that it continue and it will still flourish.
So really quick on that, give us some context around how many staff do you have currently,
About 20.
and what's your desired staff?
Right as of today, 22.
Okay.
So we will start our new hiring cycle right after Christmas, and we'll pick up a couple of folks then.
Okay, so you hit a couple things, and I took
Mhm.
notes. I'm gonna repeat back what I chose to hear.
Okay.
That I should budget about $2,000 to $5,000 a month.
I would say as low as for us, but I think most even small companies, sole proprietors, they can start recruiting with some of the systems and things that we do with as low as $500 a month. And you can start to do some killer
Okay.
stuff and
Okay.
find some great people with that low of a budget.
And so, but if I've got the resources and I
Yeah,
and I and I want to max it out, I could say, hey, I'm going to spend $5,000. And your recruiting phase that you just cited is about 20 hours a week. And you're going to do that personally for 2 to 4 weeks personally.
correct.
And
Correct.
you are, I've never met your wife, Missy, but you are, I'm going to use the word picky. You
Mhm.
are one of the most, like you said 2 to 500 applicants for the listeners. Like Don puts people through a grueling. So your standards are damn high, which I respect and I appreciate.
Yeah.
Um, so again, this, one size doesn't fit all, and I appreciate you sharing exactly what you do. When you say 100%, give me context around that. So you have
Okay, so
20,
think about it this way. Let's make the math easy. Let's
yeah,
pretend you had a service company, remodeling company, construction company. You had 12 people in it. And every single month, somebody left you, whether it was part of your office staff or field staff,
yeah,
right? I know there's folks listening to this. They're like, they have gone through those phases where you're just like, seems like every month somebody wants to leave. Well, do you have a process in place that you could literally replace every single person as they're leaving? They're giving you their 2 weeks notice. You know
hell
that at the end
no,
of that 2 weeks, or maybe there might be a week or two gap, you're going to have somebody new starting. I've
hell no,
lived that.
yeah,
I've
yeah,
lived that for long periods of time. And then I'll have periods of time where nobody seems to want to leave, right?
yeah,
And I got to manage people out. It'll just ebb and flow like that. So
yeah.
does that give you a picture of how
It
that might?
does. It does. And it reminds me of a lot of our Voxes in the morning where
Mhm.
we're sharing with each other how to overcome the current season of challenges. And it is, it comes in waves. And I
Yes.
really appreciate one of the things that you've been reminding me of recently. This recording's taking place in December,
Mhm.
and the amount of seasonal depression that takes place, that people quit relationships, jobs, lots of things in December, January, February. So this topic's very timely for me as well.
Exactly.
That's
All right.
good.
Let's get into some of the meat. Let's
Yeah,
the
man.
last piece of philosophy I'll just give you, and then let's
Yeah,
get down in the weeds. Let's give
yeah,
guys some really actionable things they can do right now to make their hiring process better. The
yeah.
first thing I would say though is from a philosophical standpoint, you cannot hire to what you want. I think it's a big mistake. Make your hiring process to weed out all of the applicants that you know won't fit. And here's why. Look, I think it's a statement of arrogance for anyone to say, I think I know exactly what I want, and I have the ability to assess that in another person in a hiring phase. I think that's utter bullshit. And it will set you up to fail.
Yeah.
What's more reliable, however, and what is more realistic is to go, okay, I know what I don't need and I know what I don't want. And that's both in the attributes of the person, the things that they'll demonstrate to you in the process, the skills they don't have, right? That's a lot easier to assess. And in order to do that, the practical application would be take inventory of all the things or situations that have led you to fire somebody or led you to want to? And then you were like, oh, yeah, they quit. Awesome.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Write those down.
Let me
What
ask
were
you, let me ask you a question because I don't know how I call you a master at this. Um, that you have expertise in recruiting and training. For listeners that aren't watching this, they can't see me do this, but you can see me like take my pulse.
sure?
And one of my questions that I don't think I've ever asked you
Mhm.
is that I have had many seasons in business, especially starting out, where if you had a pulse, I'd take you. Like I'm just so desperate, I'll take anybody. And so, have you ever lived in that season?
Yeah, I've just chosen instead to hemorrhage money while
Yeah,
there wasn't people to do the work and deal with the consequences. Have I lowered my standards? Yes. Have I gone so far as to ever just put butts in trucks? No, I've never done that, and I've just decided that I would only because at the time, even at times where I've lowered the standards, it's made my life such a living hell and ended up costing me so much money in the long run. Um, it just it wouldn't make sense. But yes, the larger point is you do have to have some shifting standards. And you had asked about that early. What are our standards look like? I'll explain that in a second. But yeah, you have to have some shifting standards given the environment you're operating in. And for example, years like 2018, 19, those were rough years. I mean, the economy's booming. It was great for people in the trades, but guys like me, we were getting rough shot over, man. We were being treated by shit like most of our employees, and we just had to take it because that was just the nature of it. So if you have the ability to take some abuse,
yeah,
right? As I did. And
yeah,
so that was the way that maybe I adjusted my standard. I was
yeah,
willing to take a lot more abuse and maybe do things that now I don't tolerate or now I won't do or I didn't do beforehand. But to give you an idea of standards, and this can be different for every organization, right? It's not to say that the way I do it is the correct way. There are people that may be more picky than I am or less, and that's fine. But out of every 100 applicants, our hire rate is about a 0.5%. That gives you an idea
say that one
of
more time.
out of 100 applicants, our hire rate is about a 0.5%. There are some times where we see that hire rate go as high as 2%, and we're just, woohoo, we must have done something right. But that's just probably some statistical variation. But over time, that's about where it levels out. So that's the kind of person we're looking for. And so
Yeah,
given that, we do just have to put a huge volume of people through the system.
yeah,
If the nature, now that's if I'm hiring a craftsman. If I'm hiring a marketer, for example, because I've had to hire a lot of that position over the years, my hire rate, all I need is 50 applicants to make a hire, right? It's just a very different beast, a very different animal in terms of how hard it is to find a person that I want to hire.
okay. So,
So that can vary a lot.
yeah, I'm going to be Captain Obvious here.
Mhm.
Many of us that have hired people have said to ourselves 90 days into the hire, how the hell did I miss that? Because I don't hire, I'm not an HR. I've not been trained to hire people. So I'm fascinated when you say weed people out, some of the tools you use that will prevent us from missing blind spot. Like,
Okay, let's
just,
do it by example.
yeah.
Okay. Most of us in the trades, showing up on time is critical, right? If you
Oh,
have
yeah.
a job site, you got 4 or 5 people coming to the job site, you're the job lead for the day. You want to brief everybody on their task responsibilities, what the timeline, what the flow of the project's going to look like today. And we all know it's devastating if Smedley's rolling in here. If we're supposed to be there at 8 and Smedley rolls in, at 8:15 or 8:20, well, that thrashes your whole morning because you're trying to
Right.
set everybody up and maybe be off the job site by 8:10 or 8:15 because you
That's
got
right.
another one to go to, or you got to make a material run, or you got a meeting, or something else is going on, and that dude rolls in late. It just thrashes the whole day, right? So most of us in the trades have an extreme, if we're from a leadership standpoint, an extreme affinity for being on time. However, most of our teammates, right, and a lot of the folks that we hire do not. In our business, we're one of the only professional service companies I've ever heard of that all of our scheduling is predicated upon an exact arrival time, not range, like most trade service companies. Okay, so if timeliness, let's just say, for example, not to say you need to be on time, but I say, let's use that as an example. If there is something that's triggering you, how the hell did I miss this? And
Yeah.
maybe this is they never show up on time, then you better have a series of traps throughout your process to test that. So here's how I do it, just as an example, to get you thinking of how you might
Yeah.
do this. The very first thing I do with an applicant is I have an open house at 6 a.m. on Tuesdays or Thursday mornings, and they can pick which one they want to come to, and they schedule it. And that's the very first thing they're to do, almost before they fill out any information, they take any assessments, before I even talk to them. If they can't get their ass to work at 6 a.m. at a strange place they've never been to before, what else matters for me? Because that is such a huge deal for us. And then each successive meeting they're going to have, it's the same thing. If you're more than 3 minutes late and I didn't get a phone call, it's over. And people will come into these open houses late and I throw them out and they're furious. I have some people wanting to get in fistfights with me. But that's how I test to see, do they have that attribute?
That's
Does that
good.
make sense? And so you're
It,
setting these traps up
yeah.
and you want to at least see it happen
Yeah.
correctly
Yeah.
3 times in a row before you think,
Yeah.
okay, well, this might be the kind of person that'll show up on time.
I'm making a note because I think one of the things that I'm going to follow up from this recording is an example of traps that you could set. So, for instance, when you're saying that, I'm struck by one of the experiences I had 15 years ago, where I was looking to hire a customer service person, and I took her to lunch to Skyline, and I didn't intend to do this for this reason, but it's turned into a trap, if you will. Um, or a revelation of who they are. So, Skyline, the Sky, if you guys are from Cincinnati and you like Skyline, many times the servers are a little older and really kind and very nice and very good. Great culture, it seems. And so this older woman approached us and she said, "Hey, welcome to Skyline. Can I take your order?" And the person across from me didn't look up at her, didn't acknowledge her, and said, "I want," and she went through the order. And at that moment, I said, "No chance I'm hiring her.
Yeah,
No chance." And so that wasn't an intentional trap, but that's the idea, right? Is
right.
to get somebody in a comfortable, this person that I was having lunch with was comfortable, and that's where they show you who they are.
Exactly. And we could give some more examples of this, and that's a simple one. But let's go to something that's high level and sophisticated, even on the other end. So you can make these simple all the way to extremely complex. I'll give you some more examples. Here is another trap in our system. Part of our system to work here is you have to be able to embrace technology. You have to be able to work with a Chromebook, a tablet,
Okay.
your phone. You have to
Yep.
be able to operate within field mobility dispatch service or software rather to perform the service. So if you aren't system oriented and
Yep.
can get past little glitches, without going full stop and go, oh, what do I do? Right? Like so many people,
Like
well,
me.
you're not going to survive here,
Yeah.
right? You're just not.
Yeah.
We're just going to get you out. And
Yeah.
we've gotten rid of many a great tradesman over the years because they can't embrace the technology tools. So in the exact hiring process where they're filling out forms and they're interacting with a database, I have purposeful technological bugs that are programmed into the system to not work, to test. And there are various ways you can get around to it to test to see, oh, I hit send and the thing doesn't send. Well, maybe I could take a screenshot and send it to them. Maybe I could print it and snap a picture of it and send. Like, there's multiple ways they could get around it, but I want to see. Do they go, oh, it doesn't work, right? I can't do it. Or are they going to, oh, well, okay, I could get them the information this way, or I could overcome it this way. That's an example of a trap because that's the exact natural behavior they're going to need to succeed in the system.
Yeah.
Here's an even higher level one, right? And I'm going to give away a little bit of a secret here.
I
Hope
love
none of my
secret.
applicants are listening to this. One of our rules in our company is we don't allow beards. Now, I'm hated in Cincinnati for this. I get more hate mail on this from applicants. I get guys every hiring cycle that cuss me out and use, and this is the craziest thing in the world. What they don't realize is it's not about the beard. Now, Yes, I think most men today don't keep a nice beard and they look terrible when they're half shaven and it's all scruffy. Whoa, I'm just growing a beard. It looks awful, right? Let's just be honest. Most men's beards today are not well kept. So again, I don't want that look going into someone's home. So they can have a goatee or mustache, right? But otherwise need to be clean shaven. Well, this isn't a test about the beard. This is a vanity test because I have found there is high correlation between a guy's unwillingness to even consider for the greatest job opportunity in the world. These guys get triggered like, oh my God, I would never shave a beard. That is completely wrong. And they freak out and their mind goes full stop and they won't even continue the application process. They won't even apply. That tells me a lot about who you were. I mean, let's be honest. You and I, we'd wear a pink mini skirt to work if the opportunity was good enough,
Yeah.
right? I mean, so it's again, it's a test of vanity, it's a test of humility, it's a test of intellectual curiosity. So for me, I just used the beard thing because it was just kind of consistent with what I wanted, right? But find something like that. So like you used the test of how does somebody treat a server while they're ordering food? Says a lot about who they are and how they're going to interact as a team member, how they're going to respond to authority. So find a bunch of little things like that that are traps.
Yeah.
And again, weeds them out because again, we're trying to get rid of the people that we know are not going to fit, right? Because I
Yeah.
can't always promise, I can't always tell you who's going to succeed here, but I can tell you with 100% certainty who is not.
Yeah, that's good. What is your opinion of, depending on the season of business you're in, is, your network of friends and family, right? So you're not originally from Cincinnati,
Yeah.
but I am. And I always told my kids if you burn a bridge in Cincinnati, you better take it to the ground because you're never going to cross. Everybody knows everybody. But using that as an example, what is your opinion, by the way, from a business startup of taking advantage of your network of friends and family?
Yeah, I've done a little bit of that over the years, and it generally doesn't work out well. But there are some exceptions to that. I just think you have to have a comfort. Like, where is your comfort level of when the relationship goes south? Because it will. It always does. It could be 10 years down the road. It could be 10 days down the road. You don't know. And recognize when you're the business owner, it's always your fault, right? Like just the orientation of everything as a business owner, you are always going to accept the or be blamed, right? You're always going to be the villain. So just realize if an employment relationship ever goes south, you're generally going to be the person who's going to be gracious about it. And then you're the one that's going to get completely badmouth behind your back everywhere. Now, if you're like me and you don't care what people say behind your back, I genuinely don't. I'm not posing. It's just a weirdness of Don. I have my own other insecurities in other areas, but that's
Yeah.
not one of them. I just generally don't care what people say behind my back. They talk a lot of noise behind my back. Some of it's true,
Yeah.
So it's like, yeah, Don is an asshole sometimes. He's a benevolent one, he's a generous one, but he can kind of he's a hard charger and he can be tough at times. Like that's fair. And then people say a lot of ugly things behind myself. And yes, it's tough. I've had to fire a family member before. That's no fun. Now the relationship with that person's great now, but it wasn't for a period of time. I've
Yeah.
had to fire people, you know this, even recently, of people that I loved, literally like family. But I had to make a very tough decision for the enterprise that was gut wrenching. But you got to do it. And even if these people hate you, badmouth you, and say all sorts of stuff behind your back, you just have to make that decision. So right now, I have more of a proclivity, in my later years to just say, no, I'm not going to rely on those networks. And besides, I need such a massively large applicant pool. I just don't know enough people to feed my applicant pool, for the numbers I need to go through to make a hire. So to me, it's just it's not a fit for me in our business where it is. But even if it was, I would tend to say no just because I don't want to deal with the interpersonal drama.
Yeah. Now, you know, for context, you and I are friends
Mhm.
and we're business friends. And so we actually do network people. So, right,
Right.
Adam, I was able to introduce to you.
Yeah.
You've introduced and actually with this campaign right now, you've said, "Hey, Jerry, I'm going to have hundreds of people coming through. What are you looking for? I'll send some.
Okay, I misunderstood your
Oh,
question. Yeah. Now, when you're
no, no.
talking your business networks, yeah, that's very different
Yeah,
because now, like when you and I do this, you and I understand each other. You and I are business people, right? We get where each other's coming from, and we don't have a personal agenda like family does. Like, oh, well, I've got my loser cousin who I'm trying to rescue. He just got out of rehab, and I'm trying to put him in, find him a job. Oh, Jerry, would you hire my cousin? There's
yeah,
none of that dynamic going on, right? We genuinely are going to probably filter and qualify an applicant harder for
yeah,
the other guy than we
yeah.
would ourselves.
And yet, you and I've had some successes
Yeah.
networking, and we've also had some failures.
Yes.
And when we've had failures, and not that they're going to listen to um, this audio or this video, but it hurts. Like
Yeah.
when you send a contact to me that you think's really good, and I hire them, and they last for a while, and then they take advantage of you, it
Yeah.
hurts. Like I'm good with it. Like I was very appreciative that you, and still am appreciative that you send people to me. I don't hold you responsible for people that I choose to hire, but it does. I think some of us would be reluctant to even business network would be reluctant because if the guy doesn't work out, the gal, we're seeing an influx of women coming into the trades. If the person doesn't work out, then you feel a bit guilty. And my encouragement to people would be like, let go of that. That is not your responsibility. If you're providing somebody that you think might be a good candidate, it's up to the business owner to vet them, screen them, and see if they might be a good fit, and then live with the consequences, which we do. So that's good. All right.
Yeah. Very good.
So the next thing I have a note to ask you is okay. So we are going to work through some of the vetting, screening, some of the traps, if you will, to see if they're a good culture fit, if they're, that old guy that used to tell me you're looking for people looking for you, that they're a good fit. And so we're gonna have our standards. We're gonna do some business networking. But when you get to the point where, and I know, and you know where I'm going with this, is like you need a pond, a fishing pond. Where are the best fishing ponds that you found to find those 200 to 500 applicants a month?
Okay. This is an advanced topic, which we would have to do an entire other conversation on. But the
Sure.
short answer is you have to mix gathering and hunting. So gathering is putting out job ads. And parenthetically, this is where an applicant tracking system is going to help you a lot. It's called an ATS. There's all sorts of software suites out there now that will serve as a system for you for your hiring. And before I answer that question, let me just say
Yeah.
you've got to have a system. You've got to have a system for a whole host of reasons. Reason number one, somebody just quits. You're emotional. You're panicked. What do I do? Well, if you have a system, you don't have to think. You don't have a crate. You just go, oh, I just go back to the system I always do. Number two, when there's just the fog and friction of your daily war, right? If you have a consistent way of behaviors, you're just doing things every day, it makes it more efficient and it makes it easier for you. Number three, every time you go to a new hiring cycle, well, you can look at the system and go, hey, what should I test here? Let me try this versus this. Let me try this messaging versus this. Let me add this to the process. Let me take this away. You can experiment each time and refine the system as you go. Okay. And then that way you ensure, number four, you have a consistent way, just like you would produce things, just the way like you would build things on a production facility, right? You have a consistent way of doing it each time to ensure you get to the desired outcome
Yeah.
with the least number of resources and time possible. Okay,
Yeah.
does that make sense? So
It does. Yeah.
okay, so let me continue. So it doesn't make sense to go try to find a pool or start bringing people into the funnel until you have an efficient way to process them. Okay, part of that efficient way to process them are these ATS systems out there that will post for you. Okay, again, and we could even get into AI a different day and how AI is impacting recruiting. That's a more advanced topic for another day. But even a simple ATS will save you a ton of time and money because once you post a single job ad, it's going to shoot it out to all these different places. But the reality is, um, most people in the trades are going through Indeed these days. So even if you don't want a third party ATS, you can use the built in tool that's in Indeed. It's not great, but it will work as an applicant tracking system that will keep you on track. You can do things with text messaging automation, email automation. You can have stock templates. It'll keep all your applicants organized. You can communicate with them. You can job post with them. I don't know that it'll kick out to its competitor boards, right? You
Yeah.
need a third party ATS to do that. But that's what you can do. So you're posting jobs, and that's the gathering part of it that are coming into your funnel that way. And then you have to figure out a way to go out and find in the population of people that you think might be a fit. You have to hunt. So these are people that are not necessarily unemployed, but they're people that could be receptive to what you would have to say and receptive to a new opportunity.
When you
And
when
sorry,
sorry,
go ahead.
can I ask you, let
Yeah.
me ask you a question. What is the hunting cycle? So there's two questions. One is, what is the hunting cycle? Like, I'll just stop there. And then the
Yeah.
second is like, give me some economics on the ATS. So maybe three questions. What's an ATS cost? And then how difficult is it really to learn how to manage those?
Okay. So you want sort of the cycle of hiring and how hard it is to use. Okay. Every industry is going to be different, so I can only speak to my own. But some of the psychological cycles are going to follow sort of the ebb and flow of work. So let me give you an example. And you need to pay attention to this for your industry because even within our industry, there are different, like I've noticed the glass business is very different than the cycle of the handyman business, which is different cycle than the construction firm or the design build firm. So some of these things can even have inverse to cycles, even based on the season and weather. So you
Yeah.
just need to understand like where are people moving based on the sort of the demand of how the year works. So for us, our best time to recruit is right after Christmas. There's a window of time between Christmas and New Year's where some years, I think 2 years ago, I pulled in like 750 applicants of people that are looking for a change. So parenthetically, let me introduce just a philosophical idea here first. Like some people will say, oh gosh, turnover is so terrible and it's so frustrating. And why does nobody stay at the same place? And why is no one loyal anymore? We all get it. Like it's all frustrating. But I've gotten to the point now where it's like, I just don't care. Like I don't care. I don't think turnover is a problem. I don't think it's not a problem. I just don't care anymore because I've just come to the place where I don't believe it's controllable. There are so many factors influencing human behavior and our culture. None of those we're going to control. So it's kind of like a river. Like if you have a stream and you decide you're going to get in it and play around, right? You're going to be carried downstream at the rate that that river's flowing.
Yeah.
So you might as well just go with the stream and put your effort into, well, let me steer and avoid some
Yeah.
rocks and pick the part of the stream I want to row in, as opposed to fighting the current and say, no, I want to try to go upstream, right? And that's what I see a lot of people trying to do
Yeah.
with trying to fight and have all this resistance to the recruiting and retention problem and just say no. And here's an example of how this works is, okay, so people want to leave me to try other opportunities. Well, what does that mean? If the whole culture is working that like that, it means there's a whole host of people that are easy for me to pick off and recruit for somewhere else.
Yeah.
Does that make sense? And
It
so
does. Yeah.
that cycle, knowing those cycles of when
Yeah.
people in your industry are doing that
Yeah.
can turn that into an advantage for you. And
Yeah.
in my world, that happens around the new year because everybody feels like they're suffering from in Ohio, right? Ohio is one of the top seasonal affected disorder states in the country. We're all depressed. We've got gloomy weather. It's cold. It's at a new year. We're not making any money because we're shut down for the holidays. And in our world, this is the low billable time of year. It's a new year. We think we have to make changes. We're already feeling horrible about ourselves. We externalize it. And so what's the solution? Blow up the relationship with my employer and look for a new one. Okay, well, I'm going to swoop in and take advantage of that. And that's what I want to speak to them.
Yeah. Well, living through, we're making this recording in December 24, and living through 2020, where it was like, the market just exploded.
Mhm.
Um, and then prior to the election, a lot of business slowed down. And so when the market is exploded, then it's slim pickings. It's really hard to find labor. Yeah, and then when the market slows down, like right before the elections, then it's a little bit easier. So I think from an owner standpoint, you're a responsibility guy, Don,
Mhm.
as many of our buddies, most of our buddies, if not all of them that own businesses take full responsibility. But it's also smart to be aware of market conditions. So I find that helpful as well. That's good.
So a flip side, let's look at the flip side. It's impossible in our world to recruit in April and May because the majority of people we're recruiting many times are business owners. So again, coming into winter, they don't have any work. They're feeling like, oh, should I shut my business down? So maybe it's not I'm leaving another employer. It's I just can't do this anymore. Well, then what happens at the end of March? Their phone starts ringing again. They start getting some more requests for, hey, go build this deck, do this bathroom or whatever. And they go, oh, okay, maybe I'll gut it out another will. Then they're busy, or at least they perceive they're going to be busier. So in April and May, we're going to have no luck whatsoever recruiting. So those are just examples of like, if you know the cycle of your industry, you know when it makes sense to spend money in time recruiting and when you shouldn't.
I like that. And I don't want people to miss that you focus on recruiting business owners.
Yes.
Tell us why.
Well, they have the attributes that we're looking for to lead, manage, sell home repair projects, right? And so they like the freedom of the system that we offer. And so a lot of times they'll say, this is the closest that I could be to being in my own business without being in my own business, right? We're taking care of all those back office functions that they hated, but they felt they had to do in order to have the freedom that they couldn't get elsewhere, which drove them into their own business.
That's good. Yeah.
So you had asked about money too. Some of these
Yeah.
ATSs, man, they're under $500 a month. Some of them are extremely expensive, and there's even some free ones out there, right? So if you're just hiring one person at a time, maybe a couple of people a year, some of them can even be free. And again, if you do advertise a job on Indeed, well, then that built-in ATS is right there for you. So Indeed's a great one to use because it's the one that has the most people on it these days, but you can do both. You can gather and hunt. So you put a little bit of budget towards just getting that job ad up there, but then you spend the rest of your budget to buy credits to go resume search. And that's how you hunt. So you resume search based on keyword, and that's honestly where you're going to get the majority of your applicants. Now, how you do that, that's a little proprietary, and I don't share that openly because that there's some advanced techniques with that.
So I respect that.
Yeah.
Tell me again, tell me again. So for just baby steps for somebody that's like, all right, would you recommend like a starting point? Obviously we got a lot of work to do to build out the vetting process, et cetera. Um, Recognizing your values, the type of person that would fit into your culture, and anyway, your avatar, right? Just as important as it is for us to identify our customer, our external customer avatar, we use the term internal customer for our staff. So what's that avatar? What's the persona of that?
I think it's more effective to start with what you don't want and set your
Sure.
process up to get rid of the people quickly that you know aren't to be the kind of people you want. Let me give you another example of this.
Sure.
Okay, we're a system oriented company. In order to fit into our process, the work itself, and the culture, you got to be system oriented. So, what I do with our process is unlike how everyone else in the world hires. Why? Not just because I'm a weird kid and I just like to be weird. I need to test right off the bat. Are you going to force me into the hiring process that you want to do? Or are you going to follow my process? And if
Yeah.
you don't follow my process, we're done. I don't even want to talk to you. It's game over. I'm not going to even respond to you. So, again, go back to thinking through what are the things I have to weed people out for? And that's where you start. If it's, I've got to have literacy because I have to have people that are going to be able to write up a proposal and send it to a customer I know AI is going to probably take over that job here shortly and make sure all the punctuation spelling's properly, but I have to have people that have basic communication and literary skills. Well, that might be the place you start is, hey, I'm going to have an open form application and I just want you to write something to me to show me. I'll ask you some questions. I want you to answer these. Just show me that you can communicate ideas because that's what I need. That's an example of weeding people out quickly before you waste any time talking to them on the phone, exchanging texts and emails and that are individual to each person. Does that make sense?
It does. And I know we're short on time now. So one of my one of my next questions that I think might be I'm trying to think about like what owners would be thinking through this process. And one of the questions they might have is, can I even afford? And I know this could be like, but at a high level, when people are looking at their revenue and they're looking at their profitability, and they're trying to figure out, can I justify hire, like I'm wearing all these hats, can I
Mhm.
actually hire somebody? How would you at a very high level, this could be a whole nother podcast, but as we're talking about hiring, what's your very quick advice to people that are trying to figure out whether or not they can even afford to hire somebody?
I, this may not make sense initially, so we might have to push into this, but let's be honest. Most of us that are building businesses, we are pulling ourselves up from the bootstraps, right? We don't have some rich uncle that's funding us. We don't have an unlimited pile of stash. We're literally, as I was for many years in the business, we're going payroll to payroll. We're just trying to make sure our vendors, our subs, our employees are paid, right? And that maybe at the end of the day, we are scrounging a little bit out for ourselves. And a lot of times we're not.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So we're always in that position. And even when we aren't in that position, we always feel like we're in that position because we know we could be right back to there any point in time if I get too cost heavy and I hire somebody that now I can't afford or that I'm not going to now have the revenue and the profitability to support. So going back to the conduit pyramid, right? The pyramid, the base of that pyramid is got to be sales. Okay. And that next one's got to be profitability. So the way I look at it is if your sales does not increase at all, can you still afford that person? If you can't, I would not hire them. The next thing that I would think about is, am I going, and let's be real here, okay? I'm going to get
Yeah.
ugly and get real here. If you're going to put a bullet through your head, if you don't get some help in your business, you might want to consider hiring somebody. I mean, that's what it's usually come down to is I cannot retain my sanity
Yeah.
by working 80 or 90 hours a week anymore. I've got to make a change. Otherwise, that it's more of an emotional or
Yeah.
soft threat to the business. That's a bigger threat to the business than the financial one. So if either of those two things are, are happening where, you know, you feel like, hey, I could afford this even if our sales didn't increase, go for it. Or I don't have a choice because either way, I'm packing it in because
Yeah.
I've got to shut this down or I'm going to self eliminate if I don't, right? If I don't get some help. In
Yeah.
either of those cases, I think that's when you hire.
Yeah. It's interesting is I'm not recommending this. I'm just telling you what I actually do. And I
Mhm.
still do this. I told you we're hiring a somebody in a leadership position. Anyway, one of the things that I started doing early on, and when I say early on, I've been at this for, close to 18 years, but 19 years actually, but is that I wouldn't hire. So if I was going to hire somebody, whatever, 15 years ago,
Mhm.
and I was going to pay them 50 grand, I made sure that I had $50,000 in savings. Um, earmarked for them. So if they came in and our revenue didn't move, I'd be
Mhm.
able to afford them for a year. And it's interesting. And in full transparency, I still do that today when we hire
Yeah.
senior people. I think, even six-figure people. I'm thinking, okay, how much money do we have in the bank? What's our cash flow forecast? And if our revenue doesn't increase, our profit doesn't increase, what's the burn rate? And 100% of the time that we've hired people like that, our revenue has increased. And
Right.
so it's really interesting, not to make it overly spiritual, but it really is that, you take this leap of faith sometimes, sorry, a calculated leap of faith. And
Mhm.
you might argue if I had the 50,000 in the bank, how big a leap is it? Depends on whose 50 grand it is. If it's
Yeah.
my 50 grand, it's a bigger leap, right? So, but conversely, I've watched people make sorry, I've watched people make ill-advised mistakes
Mhm.
of hiring when they didn't have the cash. And it
Yeah.
was they were hiring hoping that this person would generate the revenue. Um,
Yeah, if we're dealing with a big enterprise or we're dealing with someone who's well funded or has a spouse that makes enough money to cover the bills, then all these rules don't apply. But let's be honest, most of us in small business, we
yeah,
we are literally, there are times where you go through life, and I've been there many times, where you're on the other side of town, you're broke, you put
yeah,
that card in the credit card machine and you're like,
yeah,
yes,
yeah,
right. It's like I have enough room on it to get
yeah,
enough gas to get home, and you're
right.
scrounging change in the couch so that you can swing by UDF and buy milk for the kids. Like I have been there,
Yep,
and so in those situations, like you cannot take on people that you are not 100% sure that you can cash flow for a long period of time, but you're not relying on to generate the revenue.
that's good. I will obviously we're recording this. I'm going to transcribe it. I'm going to send you,
Okay.
Don, the transcription of this and for your approval. And so I'll have copious notes, detailed notes on this that I'll be able to share. I've got pages of notes and I'll transcribe. And
Mhm.
again, I appreciate just the wealth. You spent a lot of money and a lot of time learning the stuff you shared with us today. And I know you hope and I hope that we can save some owners help them navigate the minefield even faster than you did, and save them some pain points. So again, I appreciate your friendship and I appreciate your generosity of your wisdom and insight, Don.
Anytime, my friend.
All right. We'll talk soon. Appreciate you.
Bet.